So breaking points have gone full Russian propaganda. They've arrived. They have truly arrived. And Sagar, I believe his name is Sagar and Jetty. I mean, this man goes full on sloppy toppy on Vladimir Putin. And it's unbelievable to see. One of the biggest issues I have with political commentators today is this inability to accept that we have arrived. We are here. Vladimir Putin, of his own volition, of his own free will, has delivered not only him and himself, him and all of Russia, but also the West, into this realm of possible World War III. And that is his fault and his fault alone. But according to Breaking Points, you, the American taxpayer, should be real uppity and upset about the fact that we're helping Ukraine. I don't know if you guys have heard, but Ukraine has now counter-invaded Russia. They have now stepped into Russian territory, and they've had this. They're calling it an incursion. It's an ass whooping. Okay, they whooping that ass. They've counter invaded Russia, and according to Breaking Points, that's a problem.
We have a crazy situation right now in Ukraine. Media that barely even wants to report it. The United States is currently backing a full-blown invasion of Russia. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. This is from the Institute for the Study of War. Of course, you want to color in and keep in mind their own bias, but this is basically the best data that we have. Russian forces have been pushed back some 30 square kilometers or so inside of their own territory. And again, this is internationally recognized Russian territory, not territory that they have previously claimed in the Kursk region of Russia. According to Russian officials, some 100,000 Russian citizens have had to flee the area. There are approximately 1 million who are there. There are several towns that have been taken over by the Ukrainians in a so-called shock offensive. Now, the reason why it's a shock is that according to the Ukrainians and to the U.S. narrative, this is supposed to be a war of defense from invasion. So to counter their invasion, Crystal, they have decided to invade territory which they deem Russian.
Listen to the language he uses. Full-blown invasion. As if Ukraine is just the hordes of tridents is just like coming over the hill. Like, stop, okay? He's trying to make it seem like this incursion, invasion. It is an invasion, but he's using the full-blown invasion to make it seem as though the Ukrainians are just like, it's a massive horde of just blue and yellow just flooding into Russia. No. Is it an embarrassment for Russia? Yes. Does Putin look like even more of a bum than last time? Yes. But is it some kind of like full-blown apocalyptic invasion in which we all need to be looking over to make sure the Ukrainians don't mess it up? No, okay? That's not what's happening. He sits there and talks about, well, they're invading internationally recognized Russian territory. You mean like Russia invaded internationally recognized Crimea? And then annexed that after denying it was their troops there for the longest? Vlad, is that you over there? No. You sure that's not you? No, it's not me. He sat there and lied and said, those aren't my troops. No. And then when Crimea was secured, those are my troops. And oh, by the way, Crimea is ours now. Then they reinvade Ukraine again, take a significant amount of the Donbass region, all of which is in no way, shape, or form internationally recognized to be Russian territory. The Russians just took it, and now the Ukrainians and the West need to be really, really concerned about Russia's internationally recognized territory. Can we worry about that, please? Really, bro? Really? This is what we're doing now. This is politics. This is alternative media today. Is pump like this. Who cares if it's internationally recognized Russian territory? Russia seems to be, and you also seem to be of the mind that they can do whatever they please, whenever they please. Consequences should never befall them. Ukraine shouldn't be able to strike into Russia. That will escalate things. Could. But we're already here. The goal right now is to make Russia economically and militarily pay for this invasion to the point that they can no longer do this again. The problem here is every single time Putin offers a deal, it's completely unreasonable. And it always ends with Ukraine can't join NATO. Shh. Ukraine can't have an alliance that secures its security. Shh. That's every single time. It is abundantly obvious the only message Russia and Putin will understand is violence. Everyone knows this. Everyone knows it. I don't know why you're having a hard time understanding this. He sits there and says it's a so-called shock offensive. So-called shock offensive. You think Russia is happy to find out the Ukrainians have invaded their land? I mean, they already got embarrassed by being unable to defeat Ukraine over the course of 2 years, despite being considered the second strongest and by some real serious meat munchers, the strongest military in the world. I mean, Colonel McGregor's twerking on it, sliding on it. I mean, he really, really did believe that the Russians were just the best of the best. They're struggling to defeat the Ukrainians. Struggling. They're trudging their feet in the snow, down bad, all kind of ways. For us to call it a so-called shock offensive, I mean, was Russia prepared? Clearly not. Russia wasn't prepared for that incursion. Hence why the Ukrainians are, Millie rocking all up on their head top, just dancing all up in it. That's exactly what's going on. The Russians were not prepared. It is a shock offensive. Why are we pretending otherwise? Then he sits there and says, according to the Ukrainians and the U.S. narrative, opposed to what? The Russian narrative we're receiving in this video? Whose side are you on here, actually? That's the question one should ask. People in the alternative media spaces such as yourself and Dave Smith and others, whose side are you actually on here? The United States of America and NATO and the West? Or Russia? Is that whose side you're on? That's whose side you're on. Russia. Okay. It's just language matters, guys. When you hear people like Sagar sit there and say stuff like the U.S. narrative, this is what we call drizzling. Like Salt Bae, he's just drizzling the bullshit in his little diatribe to shift certain gears in your brain to turn you against NATO and the West. He's Salt Baeing the propaganda right into this video. But let's proceed.
Philosophically, I don't really have a problem with this. Of course, whenever you're in a war, you should be doing whatever you need to. The issue is not what the Ukrainians are doing. It's the fact that U.S. NATO weaponry is being employed to literally invade Russia.
Yeah.
And when we flip it around and we consider what it would look like here, this...
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I have to... Don't pretend like I don't have a problem with this. I just have a problem with the fact that, the people who signed a contract promising Ukraine that they would protect their sovereignty in exchange for giving up their nuclear weapons, I have a problem with the fact that we're honoring our contract. Big dog. We told these people, I believe it was a Budapest memorandum or whatever, we told these people, gee, we will protect you in the event that your security comes into question. If anything happens, just give up the nukes. And if you give up the nukes, we will stand beside you. We will stand beside you. We will protect you. We will help you. You have a problem with the fact that we're helping the Ukrainians with U.S. tax dollars? You do realize these weapons are made here at home, right? You do realize Americans get to put food on their tables, clothing on their backs, and roofs over the heads of themselves and their children because they're manufacturing the weapons! Americans get paid, okay? They get paid. I don't know where they spend the money at. I was single, 20-something years old, building weapons of slight destruction for Ukraine. I'd be in the club. I'd tell the hoes, like, this is that Ukraine money. You feel what I'm saying? Like, I would actually be hyped. Sagar's hating. Like, why are you hating? The weaponry that we're manufacturing is mostly manufactured by American contractors. Americans are getting money put in their pockets by this war. We're feeding our own citizens. We're putting clothes on their backs. We're putting food on their tables. They're getting it. They're employed. They're making money off of this weapons manufacturing. Why are you complaining? You have a problem with the fact that the United States is financing democracy, financing freedom. You have a problem with the fact that we're trying to stop a totalitarian, authoritarian, disgusting, dilapidated, dusty-ass state like Russia from spreading its influence when everyone in the Eastern Bloc of Europe is saying, bro, we don't want nothing to do with these ninjas, please. Besides Belarus, they're somehow they're buddies with, I don't know how, but they are. Oh, and Orban. He's just like determined to drag Hungary into this. The majority of Eastern European nations, specifically Ukraine, want nothing to do with Russia. And there's something to be said about this. This is what we call doing the right thing. We've done this before. We did it in World War II. Now, granted, nuclear bombs weren't a thing until the very end of the war. Atomic bombs. But the point still stands. Russia is the irrational aggressor here. They've invaded Ukraine illegally twice based on BS. The only way Russia can be stopped is through violent force. Violent force. Are you suggesting the United States does not fund this? Because if we don't fund this and we pull our funding, and then what? Do we still call the shots? Do we still tell the Ukrainians what to do despite contributing absolutely fucking nothing? Would you prefer that the Europeans take over and, them in their woeful inexperience in comparison to us, they should be the ones to take over the job. They should be the ones to completely foot the bill, and the United States should have no input or influence in foreign policy ever. Because it's too scary. Whoo! Stop. We need direct influence over this conflict. We need to know what's going on, when it's going on. We need to be able to tell the Ukrainians what to do. We need to be the ones controlling the course of history. We are the most qualified, we are the most experienced, and we are the greatest nation in the world. And we're just this is literally what we do. We did this in World War II. We are a nation that tries to do the right thing. Why are you villainizing this just because our tax dollars are going toward it? What are y'all going to do to bring it up Iraq? I'm so curious. This is just ridiculous to me. I'm tired of these excuses. American tax dollars. It's 0.3% of our GDP that goes to Ukraine, okay? Google it. 0.3% of the American GDP of the United States GDP goes toward Ukraine. Meaning there's more than enough imagination. There's more than enough money left behind for the American people. But if you listen to these two Einsteins, they would have you believe that the American taxpayer can't afford this burden and oh my God, and the reality is if we don't help the Ukrainians now, we're going to end up on the fields in Europe eventually. I can just tell you this right now. We need Russia to understand that if you do this shit, it will cost you everything. Period.
This is not disputed territory. This is internationally recognized an invasion. And that is literally the justification for every dollar of the hundreds of billions that we have shipped to Ukraine is to defend against this invasion. And then just consider, can any great power nation sit there and tolerate an invasion of its own territory? If Mexico invaded even up until the city of Laredo or El Paso, would we tolerate that? No, we would bomb them back to the Stone Age, as the sayings go. Now, let's be fair too. This has also demonstrated the tremendous problems with the Russian military that they haven't been able to immediately push this back. Put this up there, for example, on the screen. The Financial Times reports Russian reinforcements have failed to push back the Ukrainian incursion. The 6th day, President Zelensky has openly acknowledged taking the war to Russian territory. And there is no doubt, Crystal, that this is 100% with the backing of the United States of America. And given Joe Biden's decline that we just talked about at length, is he even in charge here? And as Americans, can we sit here and risk a literal invasion of Russia at the same time that we have billions of dollars in military assets steaming towards the Middle East, and with the Israelis openly saying Iran is going to attack us, and the United States is going to have to once again spend billions to defend Israel from that attack? Can we really tolerate the risk of these two? And the fact that they probably contribute. The Iranians say, hey, we got a lot of military assets tied up over there. And the Russians are saying, got a lot of military assets tied up over there.
That's very true. Yeah. And
this is just this is so weird. Y'all are weird. This is unfortunately reality, okay? If this is where humanity ends and we all blow up, it is what it is, okay? It's been fun. It's been a ride. Thank you to all my subscribers. But if this is the end, this is the end, okay? You know what I'm saying? If this is where it all ends, it's been real. You feel me? The reality of the situation is Iran, of its own free will, chooses to back proxies in the Middle East that caused the deaths of American soldiers in Iraq and got 2 Navy SEALs killed in the Red Sea. Do I want war with Iran? No. I do not believe we should just be trying to go to war with Iran at all. I firmly believe that if you want us to avoid war with Iran, do not vote for Trump, because him and JD Vance are talking about how we're going to punch Iran in the eye. And I'm like, excuse me, but we won't. But if it comes to it, we need to be ready for that. The reality of the situation is spending money to stop wars is how we avoid what happened in World War II. See, back in World War II, if we had NATO, if we had the military industrial complex that we have today, we wouldn't have had to send young American kids to die left and right. Had we stopped Adolf in the beginning, instead of making concession after concession after concession, things could have been different. We've learned from our mistakes. Hence why we had this big ass alliance called NATO. We have US bases all over Europe. Hence why we're funding and aiding the Ukrainians and other NATO nations. Hence why we do these things to contain these problems before they explode. So that young American soldiers don't have to die. So that Marines and sailors and airmen don't have to die. How we do that is by allowing the nations who need to fight, giving them the ability to fight. That's how we stop our sons and daughters from dying in Europe. But if it were up to y'all, well, we saved our tax dollars, yay! And then, when the problem spirals out of control, and someone presses Article 5 because Russia's out of control, they might invade a NATO state. We don't know. Every 5 seconds, they're threatening to blow up all of NATO. Russia's an irrational actor. You know, everyone thought, man, there's no way they'll invade Ukraine. They did. Now, some people say there's no way they would ever invade NATO. At this point, nothing's between Trump supporters and Russia. Bro, October 7th, Russia, MAGA, all the insanity in the last 3 years has shown me we can't assume anything. We can't. But how we really, really drive the message home to Putin that messing with NATO is a bad idea is by supporting Ukraine. By saying, hey, we'll let them strike into your territory in order to stop this war. We'll give them planes in order to gain some level of air superiority to stop this war. We're willing to turn this war into a meat grinder for your troops in order for you to understand we will not tolerate this. That's the most important thing. So when we sit there and talk about, oh, your tax dollars, Iran, Russia, yeah, that's how you keep the American soldier off the battlefield, is by allowing the people that are on the ground, the Israelis, the Ukrainians, to fight the war themselves by arming and supplying them so we don't actually have to go down there. And the cute thing about it is Americans get paid. We get paid. Money goes into our bank accounts, okay? The Americans who build weapons and manufacture weapons and work in these people get paid. What's that girl from Sweet Life of Zack and Cody? Yay me, we win. Why y'all? Stop hating.
Meanwhile, the media has basically lost interest in this story.
No,
There's
they don't
very
care.
little coverage of it. JD Vance and all of his many interviews he did yesterday, there was not, I think, one question about...
He brought it up once in a print interview, but yes, to any of the media people, they didn't bring it up.
They didn't bring it up.
Yeah.
What could be more important
I agree,
than we're backing the invasion of a nuclear-armed superpower? And hey, how's this going to end? Where is this leading? What's your plan? If you were in the White House, what would your side of the equation be? And there's zero interest in it. People have lost interest in this story because it is a lot messier than it was in the early days when it was just like, go Ukraine, and Ukraine had Russia on the back foot. Now you're in this long, grinding war of attrition. And make no doubt about it, the fact that the Biden administration finally caved and sent those F-16 fighter jets, that is a big part of the reason why they were able to make these gains. You'll recall, early on in this war, Biden was very resistant. He was very careful about what he sent. There was a lot of concern about potential escalation. The idea in the beginning that you would send F-16 fighter jets to enable Ukrainian invasion of Russia would have been considered insane.
Right.
And yet here we are, and no one's even talking about it, which is even more insane, quite frankly.
Well, we have that. So let's go and put, please, D4 up on the screen. In terms of the F-16s, they began to arrive. Now, actually, what's even more troubling is not only the F-16.
Just to clarify, there is no evidence that the F-16s have caused any of this incursion or counter invasion into Russia. There's no evidence that the F-16s have been effectively used or even used at all. There's no evidence they've been used at all in this counteroffensive period. However, this whole thing of like, well, Joe Biden was really concerned about using this level of support and blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, that's why we are where we are right now. Part of the reason why things are the way they are right now is because we've been slowly trudging our way towards supporting Ukraine. Not to mention the fact that the Europeans never took this possibility seriously, so they didn't even properly prepare. So in the event that America was being stalled by, Trump's lunatics, MAGA, the Ukrainians, the Europeans weren't prepared. They weren't ready for the United States to be stalled up by lunatics in Congress, but we were. Biden's hesitance to send these weapons and stuff like that, that's part of the reason why we are where we are right now. The reality is, ramping up the aggression on Russia probably is the answer. The reality is, this war needs to become draining enough, both physically and financially for Russia, that possibly we could maybe see a regime change. But we don't have the luxury of leaving Ukraine out to dry. We don't have the luxury of leaving the Europeans to handle it. We don't have the luxury of basically stepping away from our leadership role in NATO and saying, this is uncomfortable. We don't have that luxury, okay? We are part of the alliance, and as a result, we participate. What are we going to do? Be like, we'll give you guys our advice whenever we feel like it, but you guys fund it. That's never gonna happen. That's incompetence. That's ridiculous. It's foolish. It's stupid. That would never happen. I don't know why we're dealing in fantasy here. The reality is Congress being unwilling to listen to Biden when he was like, all right, guys, like, time to send this money. Like, let's go. Congress over there, but we're fiscal conservatives. And then what I heard, tinfoil hat, I heard that the children in Congress, aka the Trump loyalists, were briefed by the Department of Defense and eventually folded. They knew better, but chose to play games with our American foreign policy until the Department of Defense was like, come here. When you individuals upload stupid like what we're looking at right now, you make it harder for the United States of America to make smart decisions because the populace turns against leadership and says, no more money to Ukraine. Little do the people know they need to support this in order to defend American geopolitical interests and to keep us out of any sort of European conflict. But thanks to the media, such as yourselves, such as Big Tucker and Douglas McGregor and all these other goofs, thanks to people like yourselves, a lot of Americans get duped into supporting things that don't benefit them. Who's paying y'all? Just tell us the truth. Who's paying y'all? Because the reality of the situation is what you're supporting is not going to benefit the United States. Being an unreliable ally in NATO does not help us. Russia being sent the message that America's too pussy and scared to get their hands dirty. That's not helping the United States. So my question is, who sent you? Who sent you and who finances this? The people deserve to know. I'm just saying, conspiracy theory, possibly. You know what I'm saying? Tighten up the tinfoil hat because I want to know who you work for. This is suspect.
And the way that they've gotten their hands on that, it's that all of the precision-guided munitions are very, very difficult to manufacture here in the U.S. We have very limited stocks of them. And of course, what has the Biden administration done? They've decided to greenlight shipping those precision-guided munitions for the F-16 back to Ukraine. And so they're going to be using precision-guided weaponry from U.S. stockpiles, which are difficult to manufacture when we're in the middle of two global conflagrations, which possibly and very, I wouldn't say likely, but possibly that U.S. forces could get themselves into. We also literally have Zelensky openly acknowledging this. D3, please. Where for days, and usually when the Ukrainians pull some terrorist attack or whatever in Russia, they're like, oh, what a tragedy. It's crazy that somebody would do that. They're just openly saying it. In his video address that was late on Saturday, he said Ukrainian military is pushing the war onto the aggressor territory. Now, again, I want to say philosophically, I don't care about this. It is normal, actually, to try and hit your enemy wherever they are and to throw them off balance. But when it's America's role, and we're the ones who are funding all of this, and we are the ones who experience any potential blowback, then that's a real issue. We also, shockingly enough, yes, it's true the Ukrainians can pull this off. And then this morning, in the Wall Street Journal. They talk about how the Ukrainian commander is begging for more troops. They have no idea what to do. They've had 6 days worth of success. And now they're like, do we hold this territory? What do we do with this territory? Now we have to pull stuff away from previous defensive fronts. Over here, their own military leadership has no idea what to do with these gains. So yeah, it's been a good PR stunt. Can you hold it? Are you now going to annex it into Ukraine? Are you going to... I mean, imagine the hypocrisy and the sheer insanity of bargaining, and claiming that your territory needs to be given back to you, but then occupying internationally recognized territory and swapping it. Now, that's a very different moral narrative, isn't it? Than saying, well, we're just fighting back against the people who have invaded our country.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, is that the longer this drags on, there's the moral ambiguity increases, the so-called justness of their cause decreases, their overall ability to even stand this without literally tens of billions of dollars a month having to flow there in Western aid. It shows us that this cannot go on forever. And we all know how it's going to end. And so they refuse to end it currently. We refused, frankly, to responsibly end it. And we bear the ultimate risk for anything going wrong.
And that's a question.
We all know how this is going to end. No, we don't know how this is going to end. We don't. We don't know how this is going to end. The worse this war gets for Russia, the more likely Russia is to possibly summon up troops from places like St. Petersburg and Moscow. Right now they're summoning inmates, ethnic groups of people that they don't really like and don't really respect to go on the front lines to fight their ridiculous, foolish war. The longer this drags out, the more dangerous this gets, and the more ethnic Russians from St. Petersburg and Moscow are summoned up for combat, the more likely we are to see civil unrest in Moscow and possibly even a regime change. This mindset of, philosophically, you don't care about Ukrainians going into, Russia and conquering this land because that's how war works. But then you go on to say, imagine how hypocritical it is and amoral it is to be hypocritical in this way to take this land after Russia took your land. That's how war, not only is it how war works, but that's not immoral to do. That's not hypocritical. You invaded my territory. You attacked my country to take land and to culturally erase my people. I reserve the right to go into your territory and take land. This is warfare. This is not, at least the Ukrainians, as far as we know, aren't kidnapping thousands of Russian children and trying to Ukrainianize them. This is so dishonest. He says that, Ukrainian commanders don't know what's going on and are begging for more men. First and foremost, I'm pretty sure everyone's asking for more men. We're in a war where dudes are getting picked off by drones. You think they're not asking for more men? Of course they are. I'm sure commanders on both sides are asking high command, hey, if you got any fresh troops, if you got anybody you processed in, send them here. Especially when you're on an offensive and you don't know what the enemy response is going to be. Of course you're going to want more men, especially to hold territory that you've taken. Duh. Now, as to whether the Ukrainians don't know what they're doing or not, I mean, there's no evidence they don't know what they're doing. They more than likely do know what they're doing. Biden more than likely is aware of what they're doing. I'm pretty sure they're all well aware of what they're doing. They've been at war for 2 years now. They know what they're doing. This is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous here. This entire narrative is anti-American, it's pussy, it's bitch made, and I rebuke this. I rebuke all of this. This is not how we do things as Americans. We don't shy away from standing by the right side of history. We don't do that. Standing on the right side of it, not by. We don't want to be next to it, we want to be in it. You know what I'm saying? Pause. We want to be on the right side of history, not sitting there twiddling our thumbs, hoping it just goes away. But I think it's really, really funny for him to sit there and say, wow, we know how this is going to end. You could say that about Adolf invading Czechoslovakia, or you can say that about anything. Why is that all of a sudden we know how this 90%, I mean, we thought that when the Russians first invaded, we know how this is going to end. The Ukrainians are going to get their asses whooped. It didn't happen. So then you got to adjust to what is happening. And there is still a chance that we could possibly come to some agreement in which Russia has to bite the bullet of NATO. But the most important thing right now is forcing Russia to bite the NATO bullet. You are going to concede. You are going to let Ukraine join NATO. That is the only solution that can secure peace. And the only way the Russians are ever going to accept that deal is if it becomes abundantly clear to them that regardless of whether Ukraine is a part of NATO or not, it's going to be a bloodbath for Russia to invade them. Until the Russians realize their bully tactics are only going to hurt them, they're not going to stop. The goal here is to stop this from becoming a regional conflict that we would actually have to be involved in. Use your head. Use it, G. Utilize it. It's obvious why we're funding the war in Ukraine. Part of it is so that we don't send American troops. We're here. We couldn't have stopped Hamas from doing what they did. We couldn't have stopped the Iranian-backed proxies from kicking up dust and acting a fool after October 7th. We couldn't stop Putin from invading Ukraine. I mean, we could have by bringing Ukraine into NATO sooner, but there was complications with that. But the point still stands. What's done is done, and it's not our fault. The Axis, if you will, have made their move, and now we have to respond. That's just reality. I don't even know why we're pretending otherwise. I'm sick and tired of cowardice in American politics. This era of, no, don't do that, that's too far, that's done. We're here now. Yeah, it's possible that in the next 5 or 10 years, Earth could be like a nuclear mushroom. Sure. Possible. I'll still be here streaming, even if there's no audience. Even if you're all, I'll be streaming. But the point still stands, big dog. Y'all gotta stop parroting Russian propaganda. Half the stuff you're saying has no evidence. The other is just completely just morally condemnable narratives that you're pushing here. It's disgusting.
I mean, this has been, for Ukraine, this has been a real show of force. It has exposed, as you said, real weaknesses on the Russian side that they haven't been able to repel these forces on their own territory. Obviously, the Ukrainians are trying to demonstrate that the entry of the F-16s into this conflict is a real game changer for them. They also just called up a bunch more men and are trying to constitute 15 new battalions that they also want to use to try to bolster the manpower issues that remain a big problem for them. The ammunition issues remain a big problem for them. They're still taking on a lot of water in eastern Ukraine. The most hopeful thing you could say about this, no one really understands or knows what their strategy is, except for them. Maybe even the U.S. doesn't know because they seem to keep a lot of things from us. The most hopeful thing you could say is, well, maybe they're trying to strengthen their hand for potential talks.
Right.
Maybe that's what the play is here. And if so, okay. But let's have some indication from our leaders what we think, where we think this should lead, where we think this is going, since we are so deeply intertwined with the Ukrainian cause and with this offensive. And, if this is to strengthen the hand for potential talks, we need to start laying the groundwork also for what a, not maybe a just resolution to this outcome, but a reasonable resolution to this outcome that everyone could be angry about, but ultimately live with, might look like. Because when you just have the continuing narrative from Zelensky and from us that there's not going to be any territory lost and it's all or nothing and we're in it forever, then it's very difficult to turn around and come to the table and have talks and try to come to some sort of a resolution ultimately.
Absolutely. Very.
You guys can make it seem like you're concerned about what decision making the American government is supporting as it pertains to the war in Ukraine. You can make it seem like that, but no one actually believes you. You spent X amount of minutes sitting there talking about how, this is escalating things, and look at how hypocritical it is for them to invade Russia after being invaded themselves. Do they have no understanding of morals and ethics and the moral high ground in war? Y'all literally just sat there and shamed Ukraine for counter-invading Russia. You made it seem like there was some kind of moral failing in that act, and that Ukraine has somehow surrendered the moral high ground here. Now you want to finish off the video by pretending that somehow or another you're concerned about the logistics. You're concerned about whether we can secure a reasonable, rational, logical conclusion to this war in which both sides cede some things that they may not like. The reality is this. Russia is one of the most boneheaded, hard-headed, irrational, delusional nation states to ever curse this earth. And if you are going to communicate anything to them, it will be communicated through bloodshed. The only scenario in which the Russian people will accept a Ukrainian membership of NATO is if the Russians realize they can't do shit about it but blow up the entire earth. And that might be the only situation we get. Either that or the Russians realize, yo, if we don't oust Putin, we're going to get sent to get blown up in Ukraine next. Like everyone else who got drafted, like everyone else who went to war, we're going to get blown up next. Those are our options. Either make the war so untenable that Putin himself has to make concessions he really does not want to make that could threaten his own power in the Kremlin, or the civilians of Russia make the decision for him by ousting him and replacing him with an anti-war leader who will bring the troops home. The only way in which this war will reach a conclusion that is beneficial for the United States and its allies is for Russia to learn a lesson coded in blood. And people don't want to hear that, and people sit there and say, oh, you don't understand the price of war, you're talking about things you don't understand. Russia is one of the most unreasonable, irrational nation states on earth. This is their second illegal invasion of Ukraine. They engage in the most underhanded, demonic tactics known to man. They blew up a cancer hospital for children. I mean, these people are far beyond any sort of they're unreasonable. Unreasonable is the nice way of putting it. They're not going to listen. They break almost every treaty they sign. They're unbelievably incompetent in their imperialistic goals. They're delusional. They're out of their minds. They're out of their minds. Best case scenario, the Russians get the Donbass and Ukraine joins NATO. But to be honest, given how unreasonable and irrational Russia is, I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know. I can't. The only way I can see Russia accepting a deal is if they realize that going any further, pushing this war any further, spells the end of Vladimir Putin's reign over Russia. Vladimir Putin's own individual and personal power over Russia is going to have to be at risk before he might possibly consider doing what grown folk should have done and accepted the fact that Ukraine was going to join NATO and call it quits. Vladimir could not and would not do that, and now here we are. But don't pretend for 1 second like you guys are looking for logistics or smart politics from Biden, which we've already been getting, by the way. Don't make it seem like you're worried about that. Just stop. Y'all just spent the entire video making it seem like somehow or another we're morally wrong for supporting Ukraine's counter invasion, and there's something hypocritical about it and morally failing in that counter invasion. There's a moral failure here, according to you two. According to the two of you, there's an apparent moral failure on the side of Ukraine, and the United States is getting caught up in this moral failure and this hypocrisy by funding this war, by supporting Ukraine. And the American taxpayer should be really concerned about what we're doing, and we're getting caught up in a nuclear conflict. Hello, we signed a contract telling the Ukrainians, hey, give up these nukes and we will secure your national security. You can rely on us to protect you. Someone broke that deal. It just so happens to coincidentally, not really a coincidence, be Russia. And now we have to aid and support Ukraine in their fight against Russia in order to not just secure a NATO-friendly nation like Ukraine, but also to secure all of NATO, because the reality is Russia is now an irrational actor. They still maintain and demand that we do not in any way, shape, or form bring Ukraine into NATO. And by the way, I think it's really, really bitch-made that y'all sit there and talk about, oh, you know, we're sending money to Ukraine and we're funding this war that seems to have no end in sight. And, you know, they're hypocritically invading Russian land and taking internationally recognized Russian territory. Meanwhile, I haven't heard a peep out of y'all about the fact that Iran, China, and North Korea are Russia's cheerleaders. I believe Putin went down to North Korea to chat it up with Kimmy Boy to see if he could get some weapons. He got them little Toys R Us weapons from Kimmy. Y'all ain't saying nothing about that in this video, though. What's up with that? So as Putin secures weaponry from some of the shadiest, dustiest, nastiest, creepiest nation states on earth, the West is just supposed to sit there and say, well, I really hope things go according to plan. What happened to the real? What happened? What happened to the United. We used to be gangsters. We used to be real mobsters. Now look at us. We're just bitches. Like, what happened? We used to really be about that life. Now look at us, twiddling our fingers like he not. Well, Lord have mercy. Oh my God. Oh man. Not a single word about Kenny Boy and Vlad. Vlad pulled up to North Korea. They had little billboards. He's short, so he can fit into the screen. Billboards with Vladdy Boy and all of that. And y'all, and this is what we get. We get y'all complaining about American participation in the conflict. Nothing to say about the fact that the axis, basically, of evil is chipping in. You know, doing a little tithes and offering. You know, supporting Russia's demonic force in Ukraine. Y'all nothing to say about that? Figures. Finishing off the video talking some bullshit about how we really want our leaders to have an effective conclusion to this war that makes sense. And you know, it might not make everybody happy. Stop. No, you don't. You're not worried about that at all. If you really wanted a solution that made everybody happy, you would want Ukraine to get more weaponry, because you would understand Russia's not going to concede until it becomes abundantly clear they cannot fight anymore. And that means Ukraine being able to make up for what they lack in manpower and ammunition. They're going to need a lot of ammunition. How do we get them more ammunition? By passing fiscal bills to send them more aid. But unfortunately, we got the MAGAites, the Trumpites, messing everything up in Congress. Sitting and talking about some y'all are worried about an effective conclusion to the war. Stop. The only lesson the Russians understand is war, okay? So as far as I'm concerned, send the Ukrainians whatever they need, okay? Send them civil war weapons. Send them whatever you send them. Send them swords. Send these niggas ninja stars. I don't send them kunai and shuriken. I don't care what you need. Send them ninja scrolls. Send them elder scrolls. I don't care what you send. Send them whatever works, okay? That's all I'm asking for is effectiveness. Unlike y'all. Talking about something we want a conclusion that works for both sides. After you just sat there and basically made it seem like any extreme aggression from Ukraine is bad. Ukraine should just slow step their way toward fighting for their freedom. Like, what happened to us? We're supposed to be a nation that loves freedom and fights against tyranny, and now y'all are just, what happened? What's happening to this country? If you like this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I'm going live tomorrow to debate on the Hippy Dippy Show. It's going to be debating. It's going to be a 4v4. Be sure to tune in 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Be sure to pop in.